So let's talk about socialism, and I use that because it's more of a buzzword. But when I look at so we started by talking about school choice issues, and the real problem here is well outside of schools. It's government monopolies by mandate. Basically, you've got police departments, for instance. You've got just government institutions as a whole that have instantly monopolized the institution, and you end up with these ineffective, bloated, terrible services because they have no incentive to improve. So this whole school choice thing that we've been talking about is interesting to me because it exemplifies the bigger problem with the instant monopolization of power. When it comes to this socialist idea that the government should run all healthcare, you realize you are taking away any incentive and option for competition, improvement, because there will never be a reason other than people complain. But when you have market incentives, and I'm not a laissez-faire guy, I'm fairly moderate. I think regulation and government programs can work. But I also think one of the biggest problems we have in economics would be general monopolization. If corporations instantly dominate a market like you see with Google, we get censorship, we get manipulation, we get abuse of power. That's bad. Why would we snap our fingers and vote to monopolize all power in another area? It makes literally no sense to me.
Doesn't make any sense. And yeah, a lot of the same people who think that big tech monopolies are a bad thing, big pharmaceutical monopolies are a bad thing, and other types of monopolies, if they're in the private sector, they'll say that they're a bad thing, but then they turn around and say that the public school monopoly is a good thing. It doesn't make any sense. Just be consistent. I don't like any of these types of monopolies. I don't like crony capitalism. I don't like the pharmaceutical companies getting patents that last forever and keeps everybody else out of the market to where they can raise the price almost infinitely. So I don't like that either, but I think people should just be consistent. You shouldn't like any type of concentration of power like that. You should like for people to have options in all sectors of the economy.
What scares me with situations like this is that it really does feel like there's too many people who think it's about my team winning, nothing else. Because how can you look, I think what people don't realize is that Google is an organization. It is a top-down organization, and to an extent, you can call it an authoritarian organization in that the people at the top control everything without question. Now, there are regulations based on laws, but for the most part, they can fire who they want, they can hire who they want, they can implement what they want, and they can cut you off from your resources by snapping their fingers. Governments, like the U.S. government, is to an extent more and less authoritarian, but it's still another system where you want to restrict its power, just like any major corporation. What's interesting to me is that people don't seem to realize government is a group of people who function in a certain way and do things the same as any other company. And when you consolidate all power within one group of people, you end up with tyranny, authority, people get abused, people get their rights abused. Why would we choose to do that instantly? So when I look at governments, when it comes to if I had to make a choice between socialism or laissez-faire capitalism, I don't think laissez-faire capitalism is the right choice for what we should have, but I'd choose it any day over socialism. Complete open free markets as opposed to complete government consolidation.
Yeah, I completely agree. And a lot of the times I like to say that the free market is the voluntary sector, whereas the government sector is the coercive sector.
Right.
And I've always also said that private monopolies are preferable to government-run monopolies because at least you can opt out of the private monopoly. I don't have to pay for Google services. It's really hard, hard to opt out. But in order for if I want to not pay for the military bombing people in other countries, I can't just move to Texas. I'll still have to pay those federal taxes to pay for these things I don't agree with.
You literally can't move anywhere. America, I believe, is the only country.
Yeah, it's worse. It's worse elsewhere.
If you're an American citizen and you go move to a foreign country, you still owe taxes. It's not as cut and dry as a lot of people think it is, because I have friends who are expats, but yeah, you still owe America taxes even if you live in a different country, because they're coming for you. So you can't even one of the arguments I often have with a lot of people, we talk about, and I say this too because there's nuance to it. If you don't like it, you can leave. If you don't want to pay taxes, go move to a different country. Well, you'd actually have to renounce your citizenship too.
So it's not a very, it's a very highly costly movement. So, at least, if we're talking state level policy, at least you can leave from California to Texas if you don't like income taxes at the state level, for example. But a lot of people are doing that.
But if you don't like the U.S. military doing things in Iraq, Afghanistan,
you're kind of screwed at that point.
Nothing you can do, because even if you move to most other of the NATO countries, like they're still doing the same thing. They're all part of the same thing, funding the Five Eyes spy clubs, etc. But
it shouldn't be set up like this at the state level either. I mean, like, I shouldn't have to pay for X grocery store if I'm not consuming those services, right? And just like that issue, I shouldn't have to pay for this school if I'm not consuming that school's services. I understand there's like positive spillovers, for example. There could be like benefits, social benefits, but that doesn't lead to paying for monstrous shopping mall schools for everyone, for rich people and for poor. And I'm okay with subsidizing the least advantaged. But the system that we have doesn't do that today. We pay for schooling for everyone through the property tax system,
right,
regardless of the type of school that they use. So the incentives are all backwards. If your school doesn't do a good job, a lot of the times it gets more money, the government-run school, because they can say, look, we're not doing well because we don't have enough money. So the incentives are completely backwards. It's
paradoxical, and it's like you have these people who complain about, say, the police. They need police accountability. It's like, well, because you have a monopoly, dude. Yeah. There's no incentive for them to actually do better, because for one, their union is going to make sure that if anyone does anything wrong, they're going to protect them. And then there's one in your area. So guess what? You're paying for it.
Yeah, if you don't like police monopolies, you should also be wary about government-run school monopolies as well. It's the same kind of issue that when you concentrate power and you only have one provider of the service, they tend to get really expensive over time, and they tend to not do a very good job because you can't vote with your feet elsewhere unless you move somewhere else, which is very painful, very hard to do. Just imagine if you had to move houses every time you wanted to change your grocery store. It wouldn't make any sense.
There's a lot buried in this conversation too. And like, for instance, in California, during the drought, they voted away the surface water rights of certain farming communities. They basically said the surface water should be diverted to the cities because the people need it. It's basically like this. If you have 100 people in one area and 10 in the other, the 100 people vote to take your resources away. And so it's another problem, because I do want to I'm trying to focus on the problem of having a monopoly over control of your resources, over control of your institutions. And so you end up with...
And you can kind of think of a school choice kind of mechanism for policing as well. I've actually written on this. I wrote a paper called Police Choice. It's published in the journal, or it's the Libertarian Papers Journal. And it applies the same arguments to school choice and says this is probably why we have a bad, in some circumstances, a lot of abuse of power with police, and then also discrimination by race could be an issue by police as well. And it's partially because, if someone's abusing someone else, if a police officer is abusing your rights, you can't vote with your feet and, incentivize them.
Well, it's a monopoly.
Because it's a monopoly. Same thing with the schools. The schools don't do a good job because, look, if you don't want to use it, you still have to pay for it.
But also, you're not the customer. You're not. Because
you're the product.
Right. Well, so you're providing the resources to the customer, and the customer is buying from the distributor, essentially. So basically, with a voucher system in any capacity, even if it was about, like, say, police, which is an interesting thing you've brought up, then you could go to a police department and they're going to try and do right by you because you literally pay them. Imagine if they started pissing off the community and all of a sudden they started losing paying subscribers.
Exactly.
They'd have reforms. They'd apologize. They'd fire people. They'd be like, we're going to fix it. We're going to fix it. And there are pros and cons there. But right now what's happening is you have town hall, city government or whatever. That's the customer for the police.
Yeah.
So the police say, we don't want these people, let's say people are protesting. Yeah, well, go and arrest them anyway. We don't care why you do it. There's businesses, and the businesses are giving us tax money. We don't care about the individuals. Imagine if it was the individuals, along with businesses, who provided the vouchers. Well, then the police department's going to be like, we're going to lose like 1,000 voucher holders for our department if we go and violate their rights.
Mm-hmm.
So...
And you can imagine choosing, and this can all be government still. I'm not going to go full-fledged and say this would be all private providers of policing. It could work that way. But, just for the average listener, let's just assume it's all government-run police departments. And you can pick, online just based on, what's your response time? What's your average response time? Or if you just see in the media that this police department, killed an innocent person. I don't want to send my tax dollars that way anymore, so I can send it elsewhere. And so it could be funded the same way it's funded now, and just give individuals their funding back from the tax system and let them allocate where those dollars go. They still have to follow the same laws,
Right. And they would be there'd be like an overseeing body or internal affairs, or you know what I mean. You'd have a constitutional protection, not like law enforcement and the federal government likes to adhere to the Constitution for the most part.
Well, they have
but to an extent.
qualified immunity, right? Like,
Well, explain that. What do you mean?
well, they can pretty much just say that, they were doing the best they could.
Right.
They're just, and so it's essentially, it gives them unlimited rights to abuse power.
And think about the reaction in places like Ferguson when they feel like they have no power to fight back against the police force. Imagine what would happen if the police did something, and whether they were right or wrong, all of a sudden the community said, we're not funding it anymore. Now the police department's gone. There you go. No more.
And I mean, this would be a move, in that would actually benefit police officers too, because then, for doing a good job, they'd actually be rewarded for responding quickly and for using nonviolent de-escalation techniques.
So bigger budgets, bigger salaries, more bigger facilities, better equipment.
Yep, they'd have an incentive not to waste the money. Then they'd have an incentive to not disrespect people's rights at the same time.
I guess I do see a challenge in that. In imagine if there's there's going to be a finite amount of money to go to, be it a school or a police department, right?
Mm-hmm.
If that's true, what if the police just literally don't have the resources to give good response times? Would you'd still end up with a bad department? You'd say, I want to pull my voucher from this one, but then you end up with two crappy departments because the vouchers are split. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but then that if there were economies of scale is essentially the argument that I think you're making. If there's economies of scale, then it would just collapse into essentially having the same thing we have today, which is just a geographic monopoly again. So if that's the case, it's no worse than what we already have. But at least in theory, if they can cut costs, if there isn't a way to spend money more efficiently, then that would lead to faster response times. It just all depends. And I'm not like a gypsy with a crystal ball saying how it would actually work. But I would think that, they're not maximizing efficiency right now, just based on what we see every day with the police departments. And again, this isn't anti-police at all. We can support people who are protecting us, but at the same time, seeing that there are some bad actors out there. And also, in this system, we would vote with our feet with that voucher to the police departments who are doing a very good job.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that would be a win-win for the customers, but also the providers of the service as well. This is the same argument that I make about school choice, right? It's a monopoly issue.
Exactly.
It's the same thing.
So that was the gist of what I wanted to get in. Like, we can talk about schools, like we did, but I wanted to, kind of address this more from a problem of, imagine if you only had one restaurant. They have no reason to be better than anyone else. They can give you crappy food because they're like, where are you going to go? Actually, you know what? South Park. You see the South Park episode where they go to the cable company?
Nope.
And so they're complaining to the cable company, and the guy rips his shirt so he exposes his nipples and starts rubbing them, going, oh no, what are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? Yeah, they have a monopoly.
Yep.
And that's a private monopoly. But that's, what, man? I don't know how we got to this point. There's a lot of speculation, but how did we get to a point where you literally have, it was the left that was supposed to be opposing monopolization of power, at least the left for me growing up, that not this far left socialists, like they were capitalists, but they were like, hey, big corporations are bad too. Now they're arguing Google's a private company. They can do what they want. And now they're also saying like, yes, but socializing medicine and abolishing private healthcare is a good idea too.
It seems like inconsistent, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, it seems like they changed. Mm-hmm. And now they're claiming to be, like, they're just literally monopolists. Like they're arguing for monopoly. I don't understand it. It's like, you want some overlord to tell you what to do?
Yeah,
I blame schools.
That's a problem. I usually just focus on the education tidbits. But like if you look at the first draft of AOC's, Green New Deal, she called for, to dismantle monopolies was one of the issues. And I was like, oh, well, AOC's coming out to support universal school choice because we have public school monopolies all across the United States.
Of course not.
But of course she didn't mean that.
No.
It was only private monopolies.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show every Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., sometimes an hour or two. And we do have a full live recorded version of the show that includes a lot of comments and smaller segments you probably don't see. If you want to check that out, you can watch live at 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, or become a member of this channel. And for $5 a month, you get full access to all of the recorded podcasts. Every day after the show, we make them available in the community section of this YouTube channel. So don't forget to subscribe and stick around for more segments and more shows Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all in the next show.